that Trump is actually trying to extricate the United States from these imperial misadventures. I don't think that he's a very sincere friend of Benjamin Netanyahu or a sincere ally of the state of Israel. And I think that he's genuinely looking to partner up with nations like Iran, Russia, China, and others. And Israel is, in fact, the only reason why this is the only obstacle in the way of all that. And it's a very costly obstacle because the United States doesn't really have a whole lot of upside from supporting Israel, but it has a huge amount of downside. It's keeping it at war. It's keeping it constantly at a risk of being dragged into a quagmire, particularly against Iran. And that would be a quagmire that the United States has no chance of winning. So it's a very little to gain, maybe not even that, maybe nothing to gain, with the potential of a catastrophic, a cataclysmic disaster happening to the United States on account of Israel. I think that the logic of all this is so obvious and so straightforward that the only thing that's keeping the United States from completely shifting their alliance there, their allegiances, is this very strong, very powerful political bloc, which are the Zionist Jews in the United States and the evangelical Christians, which are, for very strange and irrational reasons, completely and fanatically devoted to the state of Israel. We have to place the United Kingdom at the very top of the list of suspects. Because we talked about this before, but in 2019, it was the British who tried very hard to persuade Donald Trump into launching an attack against Iran. It was after the downing of the Reaper, I think, or one of those big drones that the Americans fly over the Straits of Hormuz. The Iranians downed it, and then there was this big lobbying effort to try to persuade Trump into starting a war, basically, against Iran. And he said no, and then there was this hysterical exchange of messages between the British embassy and the Foreign Office, berating Trump, criticizing him, calling him names because he refused to start war against Iran. But it was the British who wanted that war to happen and who mounted this whole diplomatic front against Trump to persuade him to do it. So it's been them all along, nonstop, always mixed in, but always acting behind the scene because they want the Americans to do the dirty work. And then when the Americans do the dirty work, then British often emerge and they pretend to be very critical of the Americans because of the use of force and they shouldn't do this and it's terrible and it's ugly. But we're here to help things and we're going to bring peace and stability and we're going to lead the negotiations, which I don't think is going to happen because it seems to me that Trump understands the game and that he is, whether he's being stupid or stupid like a fox or I think that he is stirring the ship in the right direction. And there was also a speech by Tulsi Gabbard recently in which she said that there are very strong pressures being exerted on the administration every single day to derail the relationship between the United States and Russia and to bring back the United States into the fold of the Western colonial powers. It seems to me that the Russians are consistently offering negotiations in good faith because if you offer a deal at a negotiating table, even if it's a very tough deal, you come there with ready to negotiate, ready to sign a peace agreement, an armistice, you set your conditions. If you do that, and the other side says, no, we will not accept these terms, then you are justified in continuing the war. Like you have a moral and also a legal justification for continuing to pursue your ends through military means because the other side rejected the diplomatic means. So I think that the Russians have done that since the very beginning of the war. On the fourth day of the special military operations, the Russians already reached out to Kiev to offer a negotiated settlement. And at that stage, they were only asking to keep Crimea. The British have a very close cooperation with Qatar. Again, a military alliance, The Qataris are, I think, they're the only country in the world that actually shares military bases with the British on the British mainland. They have two military bases in England where they train their pilots. So the Qatari military pilots are being trained in the United Kingdom. They have a very close intelligence cooperation with the Qataris, the Qatari intelligence agencies with the British intelligence agencies, and they coordinate foreign policy together. Let's remember that when the October 7, 2023 attack in Israel happened, it was coordinated with the Hamas leadership, which is also being coddled in luxury in Qatar, right? These are a handful of Hamas leaders who enjoy a life of luxury in Qatar, fly around on private jets, absolutely do not share the agony of the Gaza people. And I think that they were instrumental in orchestrating the October 7 attacks in Israel. And this was done, obviously, not by Hamas leaderships that one day decided, hey, let's do this. It was, I think, coordinated with the Israeli and British involvement. And they're a terrible irritant to the Saudis themselves. Like the Saudis hate the Qataris. And they're not taking action now, but it could easily happen that the circumstances in the region say that Mohammed bin Salman and the Iranian leadership say, okay, let's clean this up. And then there's no more Qatar very easily. Who's going to defend them? Nobody's going to be able to defend them. It's a war between two systems of governance. You understand that the war is existential for Russia, but it's also existential for Iran and for China, because if the West managed to regime change Russia, then in the very same way that they have used Ukraine as a proxy against Russia, then they would weaponize Russia as a proxy against China. And so once you understand that, then you know that their mutual support is not transactional, that you cannot bribe the Chinese away from supporting Russia, and you cannot bribe the Russians out of supporting Iran and China. And so we got proof of that because last week the Chinese said there is no way that they will cease supporting Russia in their effort in Ukraine. And this is the reason, because it really is existential, and this really is the war for humanity between the Western Empire, which is the whatever reincarnation of the British Empire that we're looking at, and pretty much the whole rest of humanity, and that includes us in the West. Because if they manage to reach their goal of global domination, let's say they eliminated all the rivals, they regime changed Russia, their regime changed Iran, their regime changed China, then their next target would be us. And they already told us what they think we should be: hackable animals, that we should be their worker ants. It's very hard to judge from what we know, but I see that the relationship is not, it doesn't seem to me friendly on Trump's side. It doesn't seem friendly from Netanyahu's side either. Netanyahu is desperate. He absolutely needs the American support, because no American support, it means the end of Israel very quickly. And so he desperately needs the American support, and he's maneuvering to make sure that he doesn't lose that support. On the other hand, Trump cannot show himself to be hostile to Israel, even though from Trump we had different signals. Remember when Jeffrey Sachs a few months ago had a video on X where he said that Benjamin Netanyahu is a deep, dark son of a bitch, and then more. And then Trump reposted this in one of his posts. And we saw that when Trump went and made a tour of the Middle East, he skipped Israel. He didn't go there. And he has expressed sharp criticism of Israel for their bombing of Iran, which is unique in American political life, because normally everybody has a knee-jerk reaction. Whatever Israel does, Israel has the right to defend herself. That's the only thing you're ever going to hear. So the fact that Trump was saying that he's not very happy with them, and so to try to cater to these ambitions of Turkic leaders like Erdogan and Aliyev in Azerbaijan is a way to bribe them into coming to your side. And then they say, hey, you could make all this happen, but we have to we have to sabotage the Chinese-Russian project. We have to derail their development objectives, and then we'll create this greater tyranny, and you're going to be the big sultans and rulers of this massive, very wealthy political entity. And this is very typical British. They always make promises, and they always try to appeal to their target proxies by giving them something that they might be secretly dreaming about. And they say, hey, we'll make it happen. We'll help you make this happen. And you're going to help us by regime changing Iran, by weakening Russia, by supporting Ukraine, by derailing this north-south, by partitioning Iran, maybe breaking off Tehran from the Caspian coast and so on. So this is where this is all coming from. But this is clear enough, but I have a suspicion that this is not a particularly strong card to play, because if it were a strong card, they wouldn't wait for the moment of absolute desperation to play that card, because the derailing of the Eurasian integrations and Russia and the Belt and Road Initiative was supposed to happen by imposing a proxy war through Ukraine on Russia. And this is the big danger, because as this admiral in Croatia that I like to listen to, he said that they will do everything to get somebody to detonate a nuclear weapon, whether it's Iran or Pakistan or Israel or Ukraine is secondary. But they want to cause chaos, because to them, they are in such desperate straits that they only see the possibility of reversing their fortune if there's a nuclear exchange, and then they can save their system and emerge as peacemakers. And I would like to remind everybody that last September, all of the webcams in the city of London went dark, and they're still dark to this day. Not all of them, sorry. There's one or two that are still working. The readers alerted me. There's one on that famous street where the Beatles took a picture walking across. I forget now. So, yeah, that one's working, and maybe another one. But all of the other ones are dark. And why should all the webcams in the city of London go dark all of a sudden, all at once? Somebody made that decision. That's not a random occurrence. Somebody made the decision and switched them off for some reason. And my first suspicion was they're planning a false flag attack.
It's called Abbey Road.
Yeah, correct. The Abbey Road. Yeah. The one on Abbey Road apparently works, but maybe nothing very important is happening on Abbey Road other than tourists taking pictures crossing that street. Greater military escalation in Syria, which could engulf the whole region, which is, it favors the side that prefers chaos. And the strategy of chaos has for the long time been the preferred method of foreign policy by the Western Empire. And here the chief culprits with long historical tradition of doing this would be former European colonial powers, Great Britain and France. And they essentially created the mess that is now festering still and erupting into a greater conflict. And that is the Sykes-Picot Agreement from 1916, which created arbitrary divisions across the Arab world that cut across tribal sectarian territories almost deliberately, so that they could keep them disunited, that they could continue to pit them one against the other and to dominate them in this way, because it's the simple approach of divide and rule. And it seems to me that they're still doing this. And of course, then in 1917, we had the Balfour Declaration and the beginning of the formation of Israel, which again completely comes from out of London. The preparation started already in the late 19th century. Then we had the Balfour Declaration, and in 1948, the creation of Israel's sole purpose there is to be the beachhead, to keep the region destabilized, and to use it in order to maintain Western hegemony in the region. If they resolve the electromagnetic radiation inside the car, I might even get interested in an electric car at that stage. That's not going to go very far. Israel is important, but Israel is in its dying agony. And then they have a government in Lebanon that doesn't really have the support of the people. And Hezbollah is still strong, refuses to disarm, and does have the support of the people. So I think that all of this stuff that this little cabal in London is doing with the ruling families of UAE and Qatar and the deep state of Turkey and these jihadis in Damascus, I don't think that will actually be sustainable for the long term. And I think that ultimately they will fail. And because this has been the role of the United States in the whole post-World War II order, to wage wars on behalf of the Western Empire, pay for it, arm them, and provide troops. And this is what the United States has been doing. And I think that Trump is tired of that relationship. I didn't really get to the bottom of what the deal is with the weapons, but it seems to me that Trump said, okay, we're going to supply all these weapons for the United States. But it's not like before under Biden, where they just ship the weapons to the Ukrainians and that's done. Now Trump wants the Ukrainians to pay for these weapons. And the Europeans, he wants Ukrainians to buy the weapons, so they're not being gifted. And the Ukrainians are going to pay for it the Ukrainians are going to buy the weapons, but the Europeans are going to pay for them. And I think that the terms that he imposed on these transfers are such that I think there's already about 10 NATO members country who said, we're not interested, we're not doing this, we're not paying for these weapons. So it seems to me that the whole Trump pivot wasn't really a pivot against Russia and in favor of the Ukrainians, that the pivot was, okay, you are desperate to continue this war, fine, you're going to have to pay for it now. So I'll deliver the weapons to your Volodymyr Zelensky, but it's going to come at a cost that you're going to pay. The Chinese can now they build nuclear power plants where the cost of electricity per megawatt hour is something like 20% of what it costs if you go with an American nuclear power plant. There's an Australian institution that tracks technology development around the world and ranks countries in terms of how advanced they are. They look at the number of articles published in peer-reviewed press, the number of patents applied to the market share for various technologies, and so forth. A very comprehensive review. And so what they found that about 20 years ago, the United States was the leading technology, was leading in, I think, something like 60 out of 67 fields of technology around the world. And today that practically inverted, where China is the world leader in 60 out of 67. Like, I'm not telling you the exact number, but it's pretty much that. And I think that's normal because the Chinese have deliberately made efforts to mobilize a whole society approach to technology development, to industrialization. So it's like the universities are involved, the state is involved, the private enterprise is involved. They made it easier for people to set up and finance businesses, to develop them, to bring them to market, to source know-how from universities and to hire new engineers. They subsidize universities to form technological and engineering IT talent. And as Kemi Badenoch gave away in one of her recent interviews in Britain, she said that Israel is fighting a proxy war on the behalf of the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom does not have interest in there being peace in the region. Their interest is to keep the region destabilized and to eventually bring about the regime change in Iran. Trump said explicitly that he's not looking to do a regime change in Iran. The British are saying that they want a regime change in Iran. We saw just this week a statement from Lord, what is his name? I have to look it up. Lord Beamish, who went and gave a whole statement about why Iran is a great threat to the British, to Great Britain, to the British people, and to British interests. And so it's always that side that is stirring the pot in the Middle East, as they do elsewhere, as they do in the Ukraine, as they're preparing to do in the Balkans. And I think that Trump is actually trying to do something completely different. If you keep parties at war nonstop, and you're the one with the monopoly on financial capital and on credit, you have the global monopoly on advanced high-tech weaponry. and other types of technology for communications, for oil drilling, pipelines, all the technologies that are necessary for industrial development and production of energy and transport and so on. Then if you keep everybody at war against the other, you keep them from developing, but you also make them dependent on you for money, because once you go to war, first thing you need is going to be credit. And then immediately you're going to have to spend a lot of that credit, if not all of it, on weaponry, which again, you're going to be buying from BAE Systems and so forth, which are one of the major arms merchant in the Middle East. So this divide and conquer, constant flaming of the war escalations is coming ultimately from London and then also from Paris. And we still have their military and naval presence of French ships, American ships, British ships. But the difference now is that Trump is trying to extricate the United States from that region. And I know that it doesn't seem that way because a lot of people are interpreting Trump's action quite as the opposite. But the more I'm observing events and politics in the United States itself, the more I'm convinced